It started with a stolen idea and ended with a shattered marriage. I'm David, by the way. 29, aspiring fantasy novelist, currently drowning in rejection letters and ramen noodles. Until recently, I thought I was on the verge of breaking through. I'd spent the last 2 years crafting this intricate fantasy world, complete with a unique magic system based on constellations and characters I genuinely cared about. I was living in a shoebox apartment in Brooklyn, working as a barista to pay the bills, but every free moment was dedicated to my book. It was my baby. Then I met Richard. Richard Sterling. Name probably rings a bell. He's the kind of author you see on bestseller lists every other year. Polished, charming, and oozing with an effortless success that made my teeth grind. He was older, maybe mid-30s, and carried himself with this air of established importance. We met at a writer's workshop in the city. I know, cliché, right? At first, I was thrilled. Here was a successful author, someone who'd actually done it, seemingly taking an interest in my work. He read my synopsis, asked questions, and even offered mentorship. I was starstruck. Naive, I know. I laid out the whole plot for him, the magic system, the character arcs, the world-building details I'd spent months perfecting. He nodded along, occasionally scribbling in a leather-bound notebook, offering what I thought were insightful suggestions. He even complimented Sarah, his wife, on her impeccable taste, saying she would love my book idea. Looking back, the signs were obvious. The way he'd linger a little too long on specific details, the questions that seemed less about genuine curiosity and more about extraction. But I was so caught up in the possibility of finally getting my foot in the door that I ignored them. He and Sarah seemed happy, attending fancy parties and galas. I remember watching them together during workshop breaks. Sarah would have this look on her face that was lost in thought. 6 months later, I saw it. A full-page ad in the New York Times Book Review. Richard Sterling's next big thing. Celestial Echoes. The cover art showed a constellation pattern mirroring the one I described in my magic system. My stomach dropped. I bought the book, hands shaking, and devoured it in one sitting. It wasn't just similar, it was a blatant, almost word-for-word rip-off of my idea. The magic system, the characters, the main plot points, all lifted directly from our conversations. He'd even given his protagonist a name suspiciously close to the one I'd chosen. All the little, unique details I had obsessed over, carefully cultivated, were there, attributed to him. He even thanked me in the acknowledgments section, making me seem like an influence of his book. The audacity. I went numb. It felt like someone had punched me in the gut and stolen my breath. All the hours, the effort, the passion, all for nothing. He'd taken my dream and repackaged it as his own. The anger came later, a slow-burning fury that threatened to consume me. I considered my options. Legal action? I couldn't afford a decent lawyer, let alone a drawn-out court battle against someone with Richard's resources. Public shaming? He had connections, PR agents, and the media eating out of his hand. Any attempt to call him out would be dismissed as sour grapes from a disgruntled nobody. I briefly entertained fantasies of confronting him at one of his fancy book signings, but I knew it would accomplish nothing except maybe getting me arrested. I was trapped, powerless. Then I saw Sarah again. It was at a gallery opening. Another one of those pretentious events where everyone pretended to understand the abstract art while sipping overpriced wine. Richard was there, of course, holding court with a gaggle of admirers. He was wearing a tailored suit, flashing his perfect smile, and basking in the glow of his stolen success. Sarah stood a few feet away, looking detached, almost sad. She wore this beautiful long black dress, with a hint of red lipstick. She had dark hair, a piercing gaze. I think I had a crush on her for a while. That's when the idea hit me. Not just any revenge, but a revenge that would strike at the heart of Richard's carefully constructed world. He valued his reputation, his career, his image. But above all, he valued Sarah. She was his trophy wife, the perfect accessory to his successful life. So, I decided to take her away from him. It wasn't some grand, romantic plan. I wasn't suddenly in love with Sarah. I barely knew her. But I knew she was the key to Richard's downfall. It wasn't a love story, just pure, unadulterated revenge. I started small. Casual conversations at events, offering my coat when she looked cold, asking her opinion on art, books, anything to break through the superficiality of their world. I paid attention, genuinely listened when she spoke, something I suspect Richard rarely did. I talked about my book, not with bitterness or resentment, but with the same passion I'd always had. I talked about the magic system, the characters, the themes I was trying to explore. She listened, really listened, and asked thoughtful questions. It became clear that beneath the glossy exterior, Sarah was intelligent, artistic, and deeply unfulfilled. Richard, predictably, was oblivious. He saw me as harmless, a struggling writer who posed no threat. He might have even thought he was being magnanimous, mentoring a lesser talent. He continued to flaunt his success, oblivious to the storm brewing beneath the surface. He organized another workshop, which I declined to attend. Over time, Sarah and I developed a genuine connection. We shared a love of classic literature, a disdain for superficiality, and a quiet understanding of each other's vulnerabilities. I learned about her artistic aspirations, her frustration with Richard's controlling nature, and her growing disillusionment with their marriage. She felt like a prisoner in a gilded cage, suffocated by Richard's expectations and his shallow world. I didn't try to seduce her. I didn't declare my undying love. I simply offered her a different perspective, a glimpse of a life beyond Richard's control. I showed her that she was more than just a trophy wife, that her thoughts, feelings, and aspirations mattered. We even started meeting outside of events, sometimes at museums or park walks. I never made a move on her, but I could tell she enjoyed the attention. The turning point came one evening after a particularly dreadful gala. Richard had been particularly insufferable, bragging about his book sales and schmoozing with important editors. Sarah looked miserable. I found her outside, smoking a cigarette in the cool night air. "You know," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "he didn't even write that book, did he?" I didn't answer. I didn't have to. She already knew. "He told me about your idea," she continued, her eyes filled with a mixture of anger and sadness. "He said it was promising, but that it needed refining. He never mentioned that he was going to steal it. That was it. The final crack in the facade. The moment she saw Richard for who he truly was, a fraud, a cheat, and a user. The next few weeks were a blur. Sarah started distancing herself from Richard, spending more time on her own, rediscovering her artistic passions. She enrolled in a painting class, started writing poetry again, and began to reconnect with old friends. She became a different person, vibrant, independent, and alive. Then came the inevitable confrontation. I wasn't there to witness it, but Sarah told me about it later. She walked into Richard's study, where he was busy reviewing his book sales, and calmly told him that she was leaving. "I can't do this anymore, Richard," she said, her voice steady. "I'm tired of living a lie. I'm tired of being your trophy wife. I'm tired of pretending that I'm happy." Richard, of course, was stunned. He couldn't comprehend that Sarah would leave him, the great Richard Sterling. He tried to reason with her, to guilt her, to manipulate her. But Sarah was resolute. She had finally found her voice, and she wasn't going to be silenced. "It's not about you, Richard," she said. "It's about me. I need to find out who I am, what I want. And I can't do that with you." The divorce was messy as expected. Richard tried to paint Sarah as unstable, ungrateful, and possibly insane. He hired the best lawyers, leaked damaging stories to the press, and did everything he could to destroy her reputation. But Sarah was stronger than he thought. She refused to be intimidated. She stood her ground, fought for her independence, and eventually won. Richard was humiliated. His perfect life crumbled before his eyes. His reputation was tarnished, his book sales plummeted, and his social circle shrank. He tried to blame me, accusing me of seducing his wife and ruining his life. But Sarah wouldn't let him. She defended me, telling the world that I had nothing to do with her decision to leave him. Ironically, the scandal boosted my career. The story of Richard Sterling's stolen novel and broken marriage became a media sensation. Everyone wanted to know about the struggling writer who had been wronged. I gave interviews, shared my story, and finally got the attention I deserved. My book, the one Richard had stolen, was eventually published. I made sure to detail my experience with Richard in the opening pages, of course. It became a bestseller, not because of the scandal, but because it was a damn good book. Sarah and I never became a couple. Our relationship was based on mutual respect and shared experiences, not on romantic love. We remained friends, supporting each other's creative endeavors. She's doing great, by the way. She's a successful artist. Richard? Last I heard, he was teaching creative writing at a community college in Iowa. I hear he's still bitter. Serves him right. So, did I steal Richard Sterling's wife? Technically, yes. But I didn't do it for love or even for revenge. I did it to help Sarah steal herself back. And in the end, that was the most satisfying revenge of all. He was wrong, He did not steal my book. I just helped him make it become the bestseller of the year.